Thank you everyone for joining us for now we're in the second half of the spring 2021 season of the Dockyard, and we are presenting A Radical Empathy, three films by Asarí Mundasir. Uh, Asarí is joining us on Zoom from Toronto, and we're so lucky to have him. I have a couple of people to thank, as usual, before we get into this Q&A. First of all, thank you, as always, to Kayla Myers, our Dockyard series coordinator and producer. Without her, none of this would happen. Thank you also to Jan and Lida, our colleagues at the Left Foundation, and to the Brattle Theatre, which is our venue partner and screening partner. The Haitian Studies Association has also partnered with us on helping get the word out for this screening. So thanks to all of the good folks there. Um, I first encountered the what has been sort of presented as Asarí's Haitian trilogy, three films made in the last couple of years, starting with his MFA program at York and continuing after that. Made in and about the Haitian diaspora, which he is himself a member of. I encountered this work through the curation of Jonathan Ali, a programmer based in London who works for Third Horizon, among other festivals. And Open City Documentary Film Festival last fall presented a program just of Asarí's work, and I was incredibly blown away. Not only because of the collaborative and co-creative nature of these works, but also because of the formal innovations that I was seeing occurring across time, across these three shorts. And so that's kind of my brief introduction. I sent an email out to Asarí, who handles your films yourself. Thank you for being open to doing this screening with us. And I guess I do want to start with a bit of groundwork. So first of all, a physical descriptor for myself. I am an Asian American woman, Chinese American specifically, with shoulder length black hair, and I'm wearing a black scarf, and I'm sitting in a white room with a bookshelf behind my head. So I would like to set the groundwork, because you have said in interviews that you all although all of the films in A Radical Empathy kind of have sort of a day-long structure. They kind of start in the morning and they go towards the evening, and it seems very self-contained as a short. You've said in interviews that you would spend weeks filming at a time. These are all results of long relationships, reaching out to potential participants and subjects on Facebook beforehand, all of that. I guess I'm curious, like, how did you decide to focus on different aspects of the Haitian diaspora in the first place as a subject? What was the cart and what was the horse in this situation?
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much to Dockyard. Thank you to Abby and Kayla for having me here. Um, uh, I am a black man. I am sitting in what is my office slash studio. I have a bookshelf to my right, and in the back, I have a blackboard with some writing in it. I'm so very excited to be here. Very excited to be in Massachusetts with you guys. Boston is a place that I visit a lot. My daughter actually lives there. Her mother lives there. Okay. Also, so shout out to Noemi and Sajin. um, so yes, this is a very important question in terms of how I decide to actually go to these places and make this work. But I think first I should tell you a little bit about my own story, which is that I was born and raised in Haiti, in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. I didn't leave Haiti until I was 27 years old. Wow, that was 20 years ago. Um, and growing up in Haiti, I always knew that at some point I was going to leave. Right? It was like the kind of normal trajectory that I saw. Um, and I wasn't the only one, right? But I also grew up at a time where Haiti, um, you know, it was the mid 80s where there was a lot of hope in the country. That was when the Duvalier dictatorship ended. So there was a cultural kind of renewal going on, along with the political kind of progress that we were trying to achieve. But this type of hope was quickly squashed. So that was 87, 91, 94. And then by 2000, as a lot of, people that I know, friends and family, I also left Haiti. So, and I'm not going to go into details of my leaving Haiti, but let's just say that what you see in what happens to a dream deferred is not that far from my own experience. So in films like what happened to a dream deferred, I talk to them. I talk about this film as me telling my own story in a way. But if we try to go back to Una Sola Sangre, the film that takes place in Havana, Cuba, I met these folks, as I was on vacation. As I was on vacation, there's a professor at the University at Havana that I know, and he told me, "Yes, I need to take you to see those Haitians." So when he says that, I was really hoping. I don't know exactly what I was thinking, but I was thinking, some Haitians visiting like I'm visiting, right? But when I went there, who I met were, Cubans who've been, who have never been to Haiti actually, right? So then from that first meeting, I established that relationship with them, and I kept going on. I kept going and there and to work with them. So yes, the impetus for the type of work I do is a coming from my own story. I'm interested in like in Una Sola Sangre. I was interested in understanding, well, what does that mean to be Haitian, right? Because here are these folks that never been to Haiti, who are calling themselves Haitians, but other folks are also calling them Haitians. So I wanted to know, I wanted to kind of understand that. And in the last two movies, the Tijuana movies, really I wanted to know like what it means to be in transit for so long. Because these folks, some of them at the time I was shooting were, they were very young, 20, 21, and they've been on the road for basically 2 years. So if you are 19, right? So you've been on the road for, well, what does that mean? So, these are the type of questions that I'm, trying to understand. I hope my answers are not too long. They tend to be very long.
I mean, and that's great because you're a wonderful storyteller in them. So keep them coming. I want to sort of delve deeper into this idea of being on the road in transit because I read in an interview, perhaps that you did with Jesse Cumming, I can't remember, where you say that when you introduce yourself to potential subjects, you are very well aware, even though it potentially might be a similar situation for you, or that you have this cultural heritage that might be the same, that you've made it to the great north of Canada in the US, that these migrants are looking to make it too. So you also have this sort of perhaps privilege over their situation. I'm wondering if you can talk more about how you, when you're writing to people and explaining to potential subjects the project, how you explain it to them and how you see yourself working. Like, what does collaboration then mean to you in this context?
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean this is a very important question, and I hope I can answer it succinctly. I think we should start with what I'm trying to do
Mhm.
with this work, and I know you will go back to that, but what I'm trying to do is not necessarily to explain, you know, these folks, not necessarily to even understand them. What I'm trying to do is to capture the relational experience that I have with them in that moment.
Mhm.
You see what I'm saying? So then choosing somebody to have that experience with is choosing a partner. Tijuana, I spent a few days walking around, going to restaurants, like going, where I know I would find Haitian migrants. But I only met those two groups. Okay, it's a very long story. Yeah? So the first group in Pariah, my brother, I woke up at 5 a.m. and was just walking in Tijuana, and I saw that woman who quickly was late for something. She was running, and I didn't run after her. People, don't start judging me. I didn't run after her, but I did follow her, with a distance. And then she led me basically. Oh no, before she led me there, I actually did talk to her. I said, "Hey, my name is Ezgi, da da da. I see that you're running. What's going on?" And then she told me that she was going to get her cart so she can go to the market. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll accompany you. So I started talking to her and I started following her that morning. And I think I spent the day with her, in the market. But at some point, after I filmed and I had sent her some of the footage, she liked it. But then she sent, okay, now I remember the entire story. And then she sent some of the footage to her family who was already in the US.
Mm.
And her family was like, oh, no, 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 you cannot do that. We don't want you to do that. We don't want the way, you know.
Because
So
you were scared.
that person, for example, that relationship did not work out, right? And then these guys, when I was with her, I met these other guys and we kind of click, I would say. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that I don't have a formula, right? And you have folks who would tell you that, yeah, you need to get the trust of the community. But if I come to you and I get your trust, and the reason that I'm getting your trust is to make my film, then it seems like exploitation to me, right? Um, so what I'm saying is not that I'm trying to get the trust. I'm trying to establish a relationship. And yes, that relationship, I mean, trust is central to that relationship, but it's not in a very sort of kind of exploitative way to say, I'm gonna, make you somehow be my friends or trust me, but I have another, an ulterior motive. So yeah, so like you said, I always introduce myself to them as somebody who has experienced migration, who has experienced what it meant to be undocumented, who had experienced what it meant to be scared, right? To be on the road and be scared. And I feel like when I give that much of myself, folks are willing to share themselves with me too, right? So it's not just a matter of trust, like a formulaic
Mhm.
type of approach. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the things that really strikes me about your film, first of all, I um completely agree. And I think it really shows in your films the relationship that you have formed with the people who are depicted in it. Because it's not, I think a lot of times what documentary filmmakers are striving after is like this deep sense of intimacy, of being, brought into like kind of a private space. And I don't actually feel that that kind of privacy is ever the intention. Like it's not like voyeuristic, your films. And in the dialogue that you have retained of yourself speaking and of your own, so of yourself speaking in Pariah, My Brother, and then also the text on screen with What Happens to a
Yeah.
Dream Bird, which I would like to get to in a second. But
Yeah.
this idea of getting up in the morning, as people are getting up to work, and then that's what you're being interested in. Just because we were talking a little bit before this Q&A about sensory ethnography at Harvard, there is this idea among a couple of filmmakers in sensory ethnography that when one is filming with the community, it's not necessarily about gaining trust, again, not necessarily about understanding, but this idea that through doing things, being with people in the natural rhythms of their daily life, there's something that the camera and that we as filmmakers can capture that you wouldn't otherwise. So when I was watching Pariah, My Brother, I Follow You, Show Me the Route to the Springs, I was super intrigued by, opening with your camera sort of becomes a part of the cart of selling everything. It becomes part of this apparatus that's being used in the first place, and then it sort of becomes this like very, what we call in anthropology and ethnography, process film of setting up the market and all of that before it then kind of ends in a slightly more familiar space of talking about hopes and dreams a little bit, using interview techniques to contextualize a little bit. But can you just talk about what you were thinking, what you were doing, where you were placing your camera, because it really stands out to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. I was shaking my head and smiling because it's so refreshing. When folks understand what you're trying to do, and that's one of the reason I'm so proud to be here and so honored to be here, because when I got your email, Abby was like, yeah, the camera work, and I was somebody finally noticed. But I mean, this is a joke to say that there was, at that time, I felt like there was some sort of embodiment, where I became one with my tool.
Mm,
And so, since I became one with my tool, it was easy for me to communicate with these folks through that medium. This is what I mean. What I mean is that, I mean, clearly these folks know that they are being photographed, right? They are aware of my camera. But I think, I'm not sure, but I think because there's that embodiment, so hanging out with me with the camera is hanging out with me without the camera too, I think. Um, but in that particular case, in Pariah, there's like 10 minutes of this film that I cut out. At the beginning, what happened is that you stay there for a long 10 minutes, that frame with the truck on the left side of the frame, right? So again, what I did that morning is wake up at 5 a.m. Since I know that these folks, and I know the route that they would take to go to the market, I told them, look, I would be waiting for you there somewhere along the road. So then I stayed there. It was dark. As you see, there's a police car that kind of found me suspicious, and they went and stayed behind me the entire time. I'm like, okay, me, I'm just, I'm just waiting for my friend. So the first time you see the cart coming, he's not aware of the camera. The camera, he doesn't know the camera is there. He knows that I will be waiting for him, but at that time he's not. So after he passed me, I'm like, yeah, man, I'm here. So I had to run after him. But placing the camera, the type of camera work that I'm trying to do, I think stems from that embodiment that I'm talking about, trying to be there in the moment with these guys. Because normally what I would do, if I didn't have a camera in my hand, I would help him push the cart, right? When you see in What Happens to a Dream Deferred, when those guys are making the soup, I am making the soup. I am part of making the soup. I can tell you that, right? So we are correcting each other. We are saying, no, that's not what you do first. I mean, there's that whole conversation about how hard the Jiwomu is, right? So I am in there, and I think they are in there with me, and that's one of the reason when you ask earlier, like what I think, what collaboration means for me. I think the first thing is that sort of investment, right? So these folks they know we are making a movie. They know they are the focus of the movie, and they are invested in making that representation of themselves the best that it can be, right? So that's what collaboration is from that standpoint. In Una Sola Sangre, there is a scene where you see one of the sisters. She came from Camagüey, and all the sisters rushing like, yeah, Odilia. Well, that scene you probably don't know, but that scene is actually a reenactment, because I had missed Odilia's arrival. Everything else is real time, but I had missed her arrival, and I was complaining about it. I was like, yeah, I wish I was there when you were coming to capture. And then she was like, oh, we can do it again if you want. And I was like, oh, okay. So they organized themselves so quickly that they surprised me. So that's why the camera work itself in that sequence seems like I'm shooting documentary style completely, because I'm surprised. I don't know what they are doing at all, and they are acting. So that's what I'm talking about when I talk about the investment in the work.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it comes through so strongly, um, especially with Una Sola Sangre, but also with what happens to A Dream Deferred, because we have these moments where, and this is kind of the first time um, that I saw it, and it stands out a little bit where it seems like the guys in that film are really performing to the camera in the rap scenes, for instance, and that really feels like it's this joyous, like, New Year's celebration, traversing many different ways of celebrating and all of that. And you've said before that the form of, because that shoot came together really quickly, that the form of it all came
Yeah.
together in post and editing, and you also edit all of
Yeah.
your own films. So like when you were putting things together, like were these different modalities that the film ends up being divided into, was that sort of already what you had filmed or captured? Like what exactly came through in the editing for the form, and what had you sort of found while filming?
Yeah, yeah. That's a very, very interesting question. So the first thing you mentioned, when you mentioned them performing to the camera, this is actually true, because we are hanging out and they're like, "Yeah, Izzy, you have a camera here. We should make a music video." And I'm like, "Folks, I've never done any music video before." So that was part of that. So that was part of them performing, because it was a music video that we are putting together. So again, that idea of folks being invested in their own representation. Okay. The other question you asked was about editing. So yeah, I went there and I have this footage, but then I had to sit with the footage and kind of understand. I mean, first of all, why am I even doing that, right? Like, why, what's the point? Um, because the tendency could be, yeah, let's make something that is good to look at,
Mm.
right? That is pleasing to the eye. That is, yes, you can connect to it, but let's leave it at that. um but then I started to ask myself, well, what is it that I can show, right? What is it that I can show to Abby and say, "Hey, Abby, watch this." All right. So then I decided that the only thing I can show is my own interrogation, right? Because what I was trying to do is to understand really what are the different layers at play here. What's really going on? Because even when I was leaving Toronto to go to Tijuana, my idea was, it was a story of desperation, a story of struggle, these poor guys who've been on the road for 2 years from Brazil and all. That's kind of the story I had in mind, right? So when I meet with these guys, yes, there's that part of the story too. But what I found is a story of hope, right? What I found is a story of desire.
Mm.
So then, how do I, you know, that complexity? How do I present it? Then I started to make connections, right? Trying to make connections between what was happening in the picture and the stories that they were telling me off camera. Because I did a lot of hangout with them off camera also, because I feel like, you know, I don't always have to mediate, my conversation with them. Um, so then I started, making those connections, and the connections about what was happening in the US at that time, the connection with what, Trump himself was saying about Haiti. But what Trump was saying about Haiti was just symptomatic of a history of discrimination, right? Of a history of demonization that Haitians like me have been the object of for a very long time, right? Like, I mean, the migration of Haitians to the U.S. in started late 80s, at least in those ways, and we were never accepted, right? When they were accepting the Cubans as how they say, proper refugees,
Yeah.
right? Haitians were never recognized as political refugees, even though we had a real dictatorship in Haiti that the U.S. government was supporting, right? So then, how do I make that connection to say, yeah, what you see here, there's more to it, right? Like, Susan Zontag would say, right? Like, those pictures, yes, we can look at them and see, the pain, the suffering, but what really they are doing is asking us to reflect on why the situation is what it is.
Mhm.
And I could not do that. Yeah, sorry. And I could not do that. I did not want to do that in a way that I'm, hitting you on the head with it. But I hope that the connections that I'm trying to establish on the screen kind of provoke that reflection.
Yeah. Asari, do you know the work of Ariella Azulai,
No,
a Palestinian scholar?
no,
Um, so I
no,
find her
no.
work
Let me
really
write that down.
interesting in terms of what you are speaking about, because her arguments kind of work twofold. One is she is really kind of against arguments that or statements that that photographs, quote unquote, um, dehumanize, because as a Palestinian, she's talking about, like, war photographs, and she's a photo scholar primarily, and images that are published in legacy print media and things like that. And her argument is that if you truly believe in the intrinsic humanity of every person, then photographs themselves cannot dehumanize. It's not the photographs that do it. It is the laws and the national borders and all of these policies and bombs and guns that kill people that dehumanize. But then secondly, the other part of kind of her main arguments is that um, photographs and media that seek to explain situations should not, in fact, focus on things like individual stories of suffering or survival or grit, but that they all have, especially when produced out of a quote unquote Western context, a responsibility to render clear how we who live in the West are complicit in these oppressive systems. So I feel like what
Yes,
you were
yes,
saying is kind of exactly what Ariella
yes,
Azulai has been arguing for the last decade or so.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, please send me a link, please,
Yeah.
because this is important stuff. Because yeah, there's always more going on, and me when I choose to, you know, people would could say, for example, that in these films I'm not really explaining the problem, right? I'm not really explaining the problem of migrations, the American policies, etc., etc., etc. But to that, this is what I say: you know the problem, right? I mean, like we just heard it from Raoul Peck, right? In Exterminate All the Brutes. It is not knowledge that is lacking. We know what's going on. So then I'm trying to find another way to talk to you. And in talking to you, I'm not even trying to, prove my humanity, etc., etc. I think what I'm doing is kind of affirming my right to exist, affirming my right to be a regular person, right? And affirming my right to migrate. That's what we've all been doing, right? Like, there's no, that idea that, thank you, that idea that there's a crisis, etc. I mean, no, migration, that's what we've all been doing. That's what put you here. That's what me, you know what I mean? So then I'm trying not to even engage in these kind of debates. I'm just trying to be with these folks.
Yeah. Yeah, so we are coming on to the end of our time with Acery. So if anyone has any questions,
Already?
please put it into the chat. But I do want to ask more, because one of the things that I said I did want to talk to you about also in my initial email to you was not only the migration of people as depicted in your films, but also the migration of films themselves. So for those who don't know, I am a grad student at MIT right now, and Renee Green is in the ACT Architecture, Culture, and Technology program at MIT. That is not my program, but I am taking her class, Cinematic Migration, right now, which she ran as a conference about 10 years ago with Arthur Jaffa and Karim Arnouz and a whole bunch of filmmakers and thinkers that she's been making work with for 3 decades or so. And the idea, one of the ideas, I mean, there's many, one could take many ideas from all of these courses, so on and so forth. But I was really intrigued by how all of the filmmakers there are not only making work, but they're also keeping diaries, they're writing about their work, and they really treat the migration, the exhibition part of their own films as part of the artistic process. And unfortunately, it's been a pandemic for the last year. But I'm curious, Acery, if you can talk about where this film has taken you, where you have taken it, and how you see that evolving, becoming a part of your practice, how you've experienced that too during the pandemic, perhaps.
Yeah,
You've given talks
yeah.
online, so on and so forth. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that has been a thing. There are a couple of things I think that is important in what you're saying in terms of the migration of the films themselves, and I'm gonna try to make it really really quick. So the film, for example, what happened to Audrey Deferred and Pariah, my brother, they were shot digitally,
Really.
but then they were also transferred into celluloid. And I like to say that I didn't do that for because I have any sort of melancholy about film, how folks talk about, yeah, the film, the granularity. No, that's not for me. That's not what it was. It was really about trying to replicate that movement from one place to another, and from one medium to another, etc.
Wait,
etc.
so speaking about this, did you know what Teddy Williams had done with the Human Surge when you made that decision?
No.
Okay. Just because
See, I need to take a class with you, Abby.
Yeah, because the Human Surge, it's a. Do you know the filmmaker Eduardo Williams? He's Argentinian.
I've heard of him, yeah.
Yeah, so Teddy Williams, I'm sorry I interrupted you, but it's
Oh no, please,
because
please, please. No, I like that.
he made a film called The Human Surge, which is quite difficult to describe. I think you would like it a lot. But it's basically kind of like following three different groups of teenagers across three continents as they kind of live in this like post-internet, post-apocalyptic, whatever. I mean, there's no story or narrative, um,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
like the I don't remember the exact order, but like one of the stories is like shot on film, and then scanned, and
Digitized.
then digitized, and then the digital like projection was like reshot on film, and then the second part was like digital first, and then the film transfer, which is what you did, and then like redigitized for that part what you did
Yeah,
before. So
for
he did like
exhibition.
different things for each third, and I don't exactly remember the order that he did it in, but it was
Oh
because
wow.
like for him it's also the transference, it's the movement of media as across our transnational borders too, because the transitions in the
Hmm.
film, like they kind of do that like kind of enter the void thing where it like disappears into like the screen, then it pops back out like on another
Oh
like
wow.
continent. um
Yeah, yeah,
but it's not like very non-narrative is what I will say about
yeah,
this film.
yeah. No, no. I would, I would love to check it out too, because when we're talking about, the material, what is the material, saying to us? What is it that we can do? I mean, also, what are the other ways, right? Because if we just said that knowledge is not what's lacking, right? It's not the knowledge that's lacking. So then, what other ways can I talk to you, right? So what other ways we can have that dialogue? So this experimentation with form, this experimentation with the material itself, I think, are important to kind of expand, expand that dialogue that we talk about. Now, in terms of the migration of the film itself, I was very pleased to have the films premiered in Little Haiti, last winter 2020. That was a blessing, and I thank Third Horizon for that. So so that was when they, where they started, and then from there they went to California, they went to Colombia, in Latin America, which I was very pleased. Also, I made a Spanish version for that
Mhm.
festival, and then they went to London, Open City. Um, in a way, that's why I like talking to you, Abby. In a way, because I do feel like I'm traveling with this film, although I'm not there, and I still, because I mean, let me be honest here. I do ask myself, what's the point, right? Because I'm not just interested you know, I'm not interested in those aesthetic experimentation for the sake of them, right? So then, seeing these stories going around the world, maybe can help me make peace with the fact that, okay, well, somehow there's some sort of amplification, that is happening there.
Yeah. There's also this idea, I think, like from a few practitioners, especially from the advent of third cinema as a term and coin, idea that one's films can be your passport to the world too, and also can provide people who wouldn't have been able to travel in certain ways the ability to travel across these transnational borders. So that's something that
Yeah,
I
this
find
is
quite
really true.
interesting. Yeah. when it comes to films that
Yeah.
are political in the way that you're making them. Um, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. That's Chinti Menha
yeah,
making politically.
absolutely. So, thank you so much, Asarie, for being with us. Just one
Thank you
super,
so
super
much.
short question to wrap us up. Um, uh, can you tell us, like, what are you working on next in terms of film projects and things like that?
I don't know yet. As you can see, the blackboard in the back, there's a lot of ideas floating around. But really, the pandemic had impacted my practice in that way because my plan was to go back on the route.
Mm,
Um, so really, my plan is to do the route myself, and along the route, make short pieces like this. So some sort of kind of mapping of the Haitian diaspora in Latin America. We have a lot of folks in Chile. We have a lot of folks in Brazil, all around the place, all over the place. So that's the big project. But I don't know when we'll be able to travel again.
yeah. Well, that
Yeah,
is an ambitious project that I love because it has the
very.
structural elements to continue to follow the route. So I hope
Exactly.
that, I mean, at some point, I assume we will either learn to live with this virus, and it will continue to evolve, or, we will band together, hopefully, internationally, and redistribute vaccines more equitably. Um, one or the other is going to happen. So
It's
eventually,
going
I
to
know.
happen.
Yeah. Well, thank
And
you
then
so
I'll
much.
come to Massachusetts and see you guys.
Yes,
See you folks.
absolutely. Please do. We have a large Haitian community
Thank you.
diaspora here in Boston, as you know. So, um,
Thank you.
all right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Azarie, for your afternoon spent with us. We'll see everyone later. And
Thank
apologies,
you.
this is like where we end very abruptly and it all just stops because it's a Zoom. But thank you so much again.
Yeah.